Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 14th of April. I'm Maeve McMahon, and you're watching Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, after a landslide victory in parliamentary elections, Hungary's Magyar has promised to mend ties with Brussels and unlock 19 billion in frozen funds. We look at what's at stake and the hurdles he'll have to jump. And 7 weeks into the US-Israel war on Iran, after talks broke down in Pakistan, the US has imposed a military blockade of Iranian ports on the Strait of Hormuz. We'll cross live to the Gulf state of Qatar. And despite the soaring energy and fuel crisis across Europe, the European Commission says the conditions for granting member states budgetary flexibility to mitigate the impact have not been met for now. EU leaders are due to meet in Cyprus next week to address the crisis. But first, in a lengthy press conference, Hungarian election winner Magyar teased the main political lines of his government, while vowing to unfreeze billions of euros in EU funding and mend ties with Brussels. He also indicated a tough line on migration and no fast track for Ukraine. Euronews' Europe editor, Maria Tadeo, was at his very first press conference since his victory and joins me now here for an update. Good morning, welcome back from Budapest. So look, this press conference that we saw yesterday, tell us more about it and what a Magyar government would look like and how it would compare really to Viktor Orban's.
And this is one of the key questions, of course. And look, on the Sunday, it was a day of celebration in Budapest. We were on site. Really, it was this electrifying atmosphere on the streets of Budapest. But on Monday, it was the work now that is ahead. It was a task. And you could see almost the mood shifted to now the weight, obviously, of the responsibility of a new government that says it wants to fundamentally change major parts of the Hungarian economy, certainly to begin with. Peter Magyar acknowledged in that press conference yesterday that the economic situation of the country is a difficult one. He obviously repeated that he wants, and this is the big priority of his government, which he said wants to be in place in less than 30 days. So that means that by May, they want to be working and they want to get to work. He wants to use that time now to begin negotiations to unlock European money that has been blocked, mostly because of rule of law issues when it comes to the European Union. There is now a real tight deadline to salvage before the end of the summer about 10 billion euros for Hungary or lose that money. So he said he immediately wants to get into that as a sign of goodwill. He also repeated yesterday that he intends to place Hungary within the European Public Prosecutor's Office. Remember, Orban had decided to opt out. He says he now will consider joining, and that is the goal, to enter this institution. And then also gave red lines in terms of areas where he doesn't see changes are necessary. And of course, when you look at Ukraine, not a lot seemed to be changing. He talked about this loan for Ukraine. He said Hungary had negotiated an opt-out and that will continue. When you look at Russian energy, very difficult question for the Hungarian economy, which is running on Russian energy. He said ultimately the goal for this country is to have supply that is sustainable but also cheap. And then when you look at other societal parts, we didn't get an indication the major societal changes are coming. So overall, when you look at this press conference, it was sort of this idea of a country that is staying in within the national politics and this conservative view. Things could change, but not quickly or immediately. That is not the priority. The priorities are externally to reset the foreign policy, the economy, no corruption, no Orban, no Putin. That's basically how we could put it.
And on corruption, he said he really wants to crack down on that. How will he, though?
Well, yes. He talked about the idea that they will join the European Public Prosecutor's Office. He also said this is not a change in government, but it's almost a change of regime. He suggested that civil servants, high-ranking civil servants connected to Orban, including the president of Hungary, will have to go. And then he also said, and this was an extraordinary moment in this press conference at some point, that he had information, and he interrupted the press conference. He was given a piece of paper, and he said, I have information from an insider that the Hungarian foreign minister, that is the outgoing Hungarian foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, who's been caught up in this political scandal for 2 weeks because of the tapes in conversation with the Russian foreign minister that leaked. He is at the ministry destroying evidence. So he suggested that there will be scrutiny, that it will be the police, the judiciary. He also suggested could change, and there could be changes to put forward a more independent justice. But all of this signaling a man who is really in a rush and wants to, at least the perception of corruption, tackle it.
Okay, Maria Tadeo, our editor, thank you so much for all those insights. Now, Moving on, EU member states must coordinate on energy prices themselves, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said, but she stopped short of announcing fresh measures. This comes as Ireland comes out of a 6-day fuel protest that brought the country to a standstill. Meanwhile, President Trump has said he will eliminate any Iranian ships that breach the US naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. For more on the moving situation, we can cross now to the Gulf state of Qatar and bring in our correspondent Adele Khalim. Good morning, Adele. Great to see us there. Great to see you there. Can you just tell us what do we know so far about this very blockade?
So this is a major escalation, Maeve. Even if we're not seeing direct fighting right now, the U.S. has rolled out a large naval operation, more than 15 warships, including an aircraft carrier and destroyers, to enforce a blockade on Iranian ports. So far, we haven't seen any real movement, no major new transits, and no direct confrontation just with Iran just yet. U.S. President Donald Trump says this is all about forcing Iran back to the negotiating table. He's also warning any Iranian ship approaching could be targeted. At the same time, this is also becoming more complex. China says it has its own arrangement with Iran and is warning the U.S. to, quote, not meddle in our affairs. We've already seen at least 2 China-bound tankers turn around after the blockade began, so this could turn into a standoff very quickly. And from Europe, a firm message. The right of freedom of navigation through the Hormuz is non-negotiable, and several countries have begun distancing themselves from the blockade. So right now, it's a very tense situation, a holding pattern, heavy military presence, fragile diplomacy, and a real risk of escalation.
And meanwhile, we're seeing social unrest here in some EU countries. This is all having a major impact on fuel prices, Adele.
That's right. How about €500 million a day, Maeve? That's roughly what European Union top officials say this crisis is now costing in higher energy bills. Ursula von der Leyen says the EU fossil fuel import costs have jumped by more than $22 billion in just over 6 weeks since this war began. And remember, about 20% of the world's oil normally passes through the Strait of Hormuz. She's also warning the impact won't disappear overnight, even if the fighting stops. And let's hear from the EU Commission President.
Our bill for fossil fuel imports has increased by over 22 billion euros. 44 days, 22 billion euros, not a single molecule of energy in addition. And this shows the enormous impact this crisis has on our economy. Even if the hostilities ceased immediately and the disruption of energy supplies from the Gulf will persist for some time to come.
European Commission President there, Ursula von der Leyen, and before that, of course, our Adele Khalim. Thank you so much for that live update. Now, all eyes, of course, on the US-brokered Israel-Lebanon talks as well, taking place today in Washington. But now, as a response to the conflict, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has launched a conflict response package to neighbouring countries. They're also monitoring the impact the war is having on the global economy. For more, Euronews' Mara Gwynne-Jones spoke to the president of the EBRD, Ali Reno Basso.
So there is an impact which is directly related to energy prices, and we see that across all our countries of operation. So the increase of energy prices being oil and gas, but you also have countries which are very close to the area of the conflict, which are impacted by a drop of tourism. A big important element also is increase of energy price will fuel inflation, and this also has an impact on interest rates, because the risk appetite in market has been dropping and interest rates has been increasing all over the economies. And this has a big impact for countries which have a high debt level, deficit issues, and so forth.
And I know that you've recently introduced a €5 billion package to aid these countries. How soon can that money flow? Because I'm thinking of places like Lebanon, where there's still a real risk of escalation, still an active war. Can you support these countries and their economies while the situation is so volatile?
So indeed, when we talk about this 5 billion level of investment, we are focusing on countries which are very close to the conflict. So Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, Armenia, and the idea is to continue to support them in investment. So when you have private sector banks which are withdrawing or reducing their exposure, reducing their investment in these countries, we are stepping in a way as a counter-cyclical bank, which is there to continue to support investment.
Yet, as we speak, President, talks between Iran and the US have stalled completely. We've heard President Trump saying he doesn't care about that. He's also threatening to block access to Iranian ports. The situation is very volatile. Are we on the cusp of a major global economic shock if this ends up to be a very drawn-out war?
What happened in the last few weeks was already a very big economic shock. You've seen that the Energy International Agency said it was the biggest energy shock in the last decades. So it was a very significant shock. The longer it lasts, and if it becomes more serious with the escalations that we see this morning and in the last few hours, the risk is that the impact is becoming deeper. Our assessment, for example, with a oil barrel at $100 per barrel for a long period of time, the impact on the growth on our countries of operation is minus 0.4, so a drop of growth of 0.4% and an increase of inflation of around 1.5%.
We're hearing some comparisons with the 1970s oil crisis. Is it that serious? Is President Trump here pushing us really to the precipice? Do you share these kind of grave concerns?
I mean, it's a very significant shock. When we compare to the 70s oil shock, the big difference is that the economies are less dependent on fossil fuels than they used to be. So we have very significantly improved the energy efficiency and so the impact of oil prices per se, of fossil fuel prices per se, is more limited than it was in the 70s. But if the situation aggravates and stays there for long, then the economic impact is likely to be much more serious.
To close briefly, President, I know that you don't invest in all European economies as an institution, but what could be the knock-on effects on an Europe which is increasingly investing in defence, where borrowing costs and the cost of servicing debt is really spiralling?
For Europe, the challenge will be increase of inflation, will have an impact on the dynamics of the economy. The increase of energy prices also will have a dampening impact on growth. And growth in Europe was already not extremely dynamic. Yeah. And so this will be a challenge in a context where the fiscal space for countries to, for example, provide some support for household or businesses in order to counterweight the increase of energy price is much more limited than it was in 2022, for example, or just after COVID.
And now coming up, MEPs here in Brussels are still digesting the results of the Hungarian elections that took place last Sunday. One of them is Dariusz Joński, a Polish MEP from the European People's Party who spent his weekend in Budapest following those elections. And now he joins us here in the studio to debrief. Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning.
So how was your weekend and what is your response to the outcome?
Oh, it was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Today I was invited by Polish minority in Hungary. So we spent 2 days, about 48 hours, amazing election night in Hungary. And everybody finger crossed for change, for big change. But no one expected that it's possible.
But now you describe it as amazing. So the big high is there, of course, for the voters of TISA. But now the hard work comes. How will Peter Magyar actually reform the country in order to unlock the billions that he wants?
Oh, they have to start. They have to start prepare these reforms. Yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen said that she's ready to unblock the European Union fund, about 60 billion euro for the Hungary. But they have to start. They have to start the reform. I mean, justice reform, the public medium reform. After 16 years of Orban's. It was a democratic country. They have prepared everything. So it will be not easy, but step by step, I think they are ready to do it.
And he wants to crack down on corruptions. Any advice for him there?
Yeah, it was huge corruption. Even in the election day, we talk with people how it is election and how they do it. In Hungary, they paid a lot of money to just vote for the Orban's party. So corruption were everywhere. So.
And what about the Foreign Minister Tiarto? We understand that he's been shredding up sensitive documents. That's according to Peter Magyar. Is that true? Is there proof?
I think it's true. So they have cleaned everything and they have fired all of these people from the Orbans. And I think they have to build a new country right now. Justice, rule of law. It will be not very easy because the corruption is everywhere. So, but I keep finger crossed for the new government. So I think they are ready to do it.
You think they're ready? And will this mean a new chapter now in EU-Hungarian relations?
I think it will be very strong relation between the new government and Brussels. I mean, the Hungarian decided to Europe. I saw on the election night that a lot of people handed the flags of European Union and Hungary. It looks like Hungary joined the EU once more. So everybody was smiling. It was absolutely happy day. And after 16 years, they are absolutely free and democratic right now.
Okay, Dariusz Joński, thank you so much for coming into us here and sharing your insights. Now moving on, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has called Donald Trump's remarks about Pope Leo, quote, unacceptable. The US President accused the pontiff of being, quote, weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. He told reporters he was, quote, not a big fan. The Pope has responded with ease and calmness, as Jakub Janis reports.
When you hear Donald Trump is going after the Pope, you know he's not planning to turn the other cheek.
I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime.
But hold on, how did relations between Washington and the Holy See went down so rapidly? When the Chicago-born pontiff was chosen last year, Donald Trump praised the historic choice as a great honor. Capturing a solid majority of the US Catholic vote, conservatives hoped they had found a natural ally. However, the honeymoon was brief, and tensions appeared when the Pope challenged Washington mass deportation programs, condemning the harsh treatment of migrants. But the ultimate breaking point has been the escalating war in Iran. And after the US president threatened to destroy the whole Iranian civilization, the Pope openly condemned this military rhetoric as unacceptable. But Trump instantly reminded Pope Leo that if he wasn't in the White House, he wouldn't be in the Vatican. And the Pope responded calmly yesterday.
I do not look at my role as a big politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him, and I will continue to speak out loudly against war, looking to promote peace, promoting dialogue. Too many innocent people are being killed, and I think someone has to stand up and say, there's a better way.
But one could ask, how can the Catholic Church effectively question a leader who is now sharing AI-generated images of himself as Jesus Christ? Which, by the way, is an act considered highly blasphemous under church dogma. But hey, the US president is none other than the former host of The Apprentice TV show, where he used to fire people on the spot. And now he's telling the Pope to get his act together and focus on being a great Pope rather than catering to the radical left. Otherwise, it seems Trump will go after him, and then probably after the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit too, especially considering that Jesus was a Middle Eastern refugee.
Jakub Janis reporting for us there. Well, that does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Any comments or points for us, do reach out. europetoday@euronews.com is our email address. But as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care and see you very soon here on Euronews.